Okay, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Very anticipated, it seems, with quite the crowd. So thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that the land we identify as RTO9 is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat peoples. RTO9 will honor and respect the land, the people, and the treaties. We are extremely thankful for the original tour guides of these lands and all that they have shared. All those that reside, work, and play on these lands are treaty people, and we must honor the treaties in a mutually beneficial and equitable manner. With 1 in 5 Indigenous people in Canada living in Ontario, we believe working together in a mutually beneficial manner will help all Ontarians prosper through the joint development of the tourism industry. As an ally to Indigenous people and a partner of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, RTO9 will commit to improving socioeconomic conditions of Indigenous people through tourism by creating space for Indigenous people to tell their stories on their terms. Now, I'm just going to touch on a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. First, if you weren't in the room when it started, this workshop is being recorded and it will be available for viewing after today's session on the RTO9 website, which is just rto9.ca. It'll also be sent directly to your inbox along with a copy of a 2-minute survey. If you're able to answer it and provide some feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. Throughout the presentation, if you want to pop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom, which can be done anonymously if you prefer, and also the chat window, Chris will be able to get to quick questions about definitions and things like that if you need some clarity. But if you have a longer question, we're going to save them to the end, just so that we can get through all of the material today because there's lots of good stuff coming down the pipe. And now I'm going to pass it off to Chris, who's going to take you through AI this morning.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Just let me know that you can see that.
You're good to go, Chris.
Perfect. Okay, let me just move some things around on my end here. Okay. All right. So welcome and thank you for joining myself and RTO9 for this morning's session. If you're able to attend the Tourism Summit back in September, then I'm really excited to see you again. That presentation went over artificial intelligence or AI on a much broader level to discuss what it is, its benefits, and where it's going. Today we'll be building off of that, but bringing those high-level thoughts to a much more real level. We know the benefits, so today we'll talk more about implementation. First, I just want to acknowledge that we all may be coming from different professional backgrounds, and we'll have a diversity of team sizes and resources available to us. But thankfully, this is exactly why the use of AI becomes so significant. It's not just for those with big budgets or those with 200 people on staff. It's not just for those with the leading tech knowledge either. This is a tool that each of us can use right now. Today, I'm going to cover a practical roadmap for integrating AI into your business or organization. In particular, we'll be covering AI basics, assessing your business needs, crafting your AI integration plan, going through a live demo, overcoming barriers, ethics and best practices, and then next steps and resources. Again, as Meg mentioned, throughout the session, if anyone has a quick question, like what I mean by something or a definition, feel free to ask, because I want to ensure that we're all aligned and all on the same page. If you have any longer questions, we can go over them at the end in the Q&A session. So without further ado, I want to very quickly make sure we're all on the same page in case you weren't at the Tourism Summit with understanding AI, the basics without the jargon. So what is it? Well, AI in a nutshell, literally, is a system that can perform tasks at a highly accelerated rate. It does so by leveraging the data it was trained on and then the data that you provide it. It's like a helpful assistant that you always have on standby and is always available. And the day-to-day, you'll see it powering things like email filters for promotions or spam if you're using things like Gmail. And then you also have personalized recommendations on platforms like Netflix. Just a funny side note, the Tourism Summit identified that for some reason, a lot of AI image generation tools often saw Netflix with cats, and that continues to be the case. So I just wanted to continue that trend here. And then you also see AI in voice assistants like Siri or Alexa. And then, of course, for specific generative AI tools, which are the popular ones that we're all pretty familiar with, we have tools like ChatGPT, which is by OpenAI. We have Google Gemini, and then we have Cloud by Anthropic. Now, to preface, while it is all related, AI and automation are technically two separate things. Automation follows a certain set of predefined steps, and AI, particularly generative AI, has the ability to generate quote unquote new answers based on what it knows. However, they hold a lot of the same principles, and what we'll review today can also be applied to automation tools too. Better yet, using both together is where some real magic happens. But getting back into AI, what can it do? AI itself is a pretty broad subject and can perform millions of different tasks. But it's exceptionally helpful at data analysis, ideation, and drafting content, whether that be for something like an email, a social media post, or a website. And now, of course, it extends far beyond this and can get very specific to your own needs, especially with the rise of platforms including AI and what they offer, and things like Facebook, Airtable, Eventbrite, and much more. But who's it for? Just reiterating from what I talked about earlier, AI is now incredibly accessible for us. It took decades of work to get to this point, like when John McCarthy first coined this term in 1955. But with the huge advancements in the past few years especially, it has become as simple as signing up and starting a conversation. And most of these tools offer a free plan too, which works well for many uses. But even if you needed to add a paid plan for more complex tasks, it's still an affordable tool, which typically hovers around the $20 to $30 per month mark. The beauty of having AI on your side is that it will give you more time to focus on the more important work, the creative and the strategic work. It will help us amplify the work that we can do on a daily basis. Now, with all that initial kind of context, let's jump into the core of this session. First up, assessing your business needs. And as you know, before buying into anything, the initial step is identifying pain points. This will involve some self-assessment. I want you to take a moment to think about the daily, weekly, or the monthly tasks that you have to deal with that are time-consuming or repetitive. The stuff that simply sucks your time, but absolutely needs to get done. And they need to get done properly to avoid errors and allow you to move forward in a positive direction. This could be manual data entry or formatting, analyzing hundreds of survey responses, translating or repositioning content to other formats, or even just emails. Because I'm sure for many of you, like myself, your inbox fills up pretty quickly. Now, while we think about our own repetitive tasks, if you're just one of a larger team, imagine how that number of mundane tasks grows when you account for each member of your team. Okay, so if you end up developing this list of tasks, how do you know which ones you should keep working on and which ones AI can help with? Well, some helpful criteria to keep in mind is impact, feasibility, and then low risk. For impact, which of these tasks that, if automated, would significantly improve your efficiency? Feasibility. What is the process like? Is it a specified set of steps? If so, well, AI and automation excel at that. Now, if that process isn't quite refined yet, but you believe that it could be, then there's potential there too. And then we have low risk. You want to start with areas where errors would have minimal negative consequences. Why? Well, one, because AI can make mistakes. It's still learning and still growing very fast. And two, as you get more familiar with it, the prompts you give it or the steps you take to interact with it may improve and eventually provide much better responses than when you first start with it. Now, just as a reminder, you'll get the access to this whole presentation afterwards as well as the recording. So you can always do this exercise after, but for the sake of time, I know I'm moving a little bit fast. I just want to cover a lot of different things to hopefully get you everything you need to jump into it after. So from here, You might have a refined list of tasks that you think AI can help with. Next, we want to make sure anything we do becomes measurable. So we want to set clear goals. For that refined list, you should define some success metrics based on current metrics that you have or need to have. So, for example, time. How long does it take you? Errors. Have there been any errors in the past? Customer satisfaction. What is the current customer experience or perception? And then a big one, employee well-being. Could this process help alleviate stress and overtime, and then boost job satisfaction? If so, how do employees currently feel in their role? Then, once working with AI, which we'll go into in a moment, you want to revisit these stats and see if there was an improvement. It even helps us set some clear goals to foster that improvement you're looking for. For some, this could be something like reduce customer email response time by 40% within the next 2 months by using AI-assisted drafting. Or maybe you want to decrease client onboarding time by 30% by automating invoicing and the proposal process. Or for some of you, maybe it's decrease daily caffeine intake from 5 cups of coffee to 2 by using AI to handle the tedious tasks for you. But now let's talk about crafting your AI integration plan. So step one is starting small and starting simple. I always recommend people start with a pilot project approach. This is where you'll choose 1 or 2 tasks identified earlier and use those as your starting point or introduction. If you can distill your efforts to achieving one clear goal, then you'll find it's much easier to get started. The last thing you want to do is overwhelm yourself and your team. Step 2, we have selecting your AI tools. Now, when we're talking about generative tools, there's a few popular tools out there, and they each vary a little bit. So first, we have ChatGPT. Overall, it's quite well-rounded, especially with the different models that it has available to us. And it's certainly the most popular, which may be a pretty good benefit in regards to the amount of resources or tutorials they might be able to find online. This is the tool that I'm currently using these days, as I found that it's, more of a universalness has been really helpful covering a wide variety of tasks. Then in the middle, we have Google Gemini. This is a well-integrated tool well integrated with the Google suite of products. So it's things like Google Sheets and Gmail. It kind of works directly in those items. And it's sometimes better at real-time knowledge compared to things like ChatGPT or Cloud. And then finally, we have Cloud by Anthropic. This is a platform that's known for its security-first approach and is sometimes better at processing large amounts of data. Which one is right for you will really depend on your experimentation and the quality of response to what you're looking for. Each of these offer free plans, so don't be afraid to conversate away to see which one you like best. And again, the beauty is that you're not married to any of them either. So if you find one is particularly good at one thing and one is better at something else, then you can always blend the use of different tools as well. But with that, once we have our tool selected, we need a plan. So step 3, I have planning implementation. So first we have roles. You want to establish who's going to lead the experiment. It could be yourself, if you're comfortable enough, someone on your team, or you can hire someone like myself to do this for you. Next, you have timeline. So you want to set realistic deadlines for each phase. This not only helps you stay on track, but also helps you stay accountable and put importance on this project as well. Because, like with anything else that you're doing, if there's no timeline on something, it's just going to keep getting pushed back and back and back until you eventually maybe have time for it. So for example, set a schedule, like week 1 and 2. Let's do tool selection, initial testing, and documentation. And documentation will play a key role in helping you communicate this process to others on your team if you're part of a larger team. Then in week 3 and 4, you'll do the pilot project implementation. So this is where you'll first try that, 1 or 2 tasks, see how that goes, and then work from there. And then finally, week 5, we have review and adjustments. So this is basically where you're refining and perfecting whether that's the prompts or just experimenting with different languages they're using. And then week 6, if all is going well and is proving to be very efficient, then you can start training your team. Again, this is just an example timeline, but defining that timeline will be really helpful. And then we have the last one there is resources. Of course, you'll need to identify the time commitments or frankly, just the time available and also budget considerations if paid plans become necessary. But, with all that said, you may be wondering, how do I even start? What prompt do I even use? There's a whole thing called prompt engineering. Do I need to learn all about that first? But that's why I want to jump into building confidence with prompting, the art of asking. So what goes into a good prompt? As you may have guessed, AI responds best to clear and specific instructions. While you can technically dive straight into conversation, one formula that I learned, which has worked well for me, is task, context, examples, persona, format, and then tone. So looking at the full list, task is mandatory. You have to ask it to do something. Then you have context and examples. These are both very important pieces. And then you have persona, format, and tone, which are really nice to have. And they all give you better responses if you're able to include all of them. But they're not all necessary except for tasks. And when I say tasks, the task could be a simple single task or multiple tasks baked into one prompt. So for example, if you're doing multiple in one, you could do analyze this article, summarize the content, and generate 3 action items. And then another thing for those tasks is that it's helpful to start that sentence with an action verb. So, generate, give, write, analyze, things like that. Then we have context. This is where you can limit the endless possibilities and give it relevant data, keywords, and ideas to provide a more accurate response. So you can really shape it to the, what you're looking for, who you are, who you're servicing, and kind of what important ideas will be helpful for AI to know to better shape its response. Examples is where you can actually identify a format or tone you're trying to resemble. So this could be previous or blog articles that you've written, presentations that you've given, or even something or popular methods like the SWOT analysis, for example. You can also, if you don't have anything of your own, but you have something that you're trying to mimic, you can also pull inspiration from different items. So for example, pull inspiration from the following report. So you could just copy an entire report, paste it into ChatGPT, and ask it to identify or take resemblance of whatever that thing may be. And then you have persona. Persona is having the AI model the knowledge or use the same knowledge as someone very well known. Basically, who would you wish you had access to right now when you're asking that question? And being very specific and definitive can really help. So instead of saying act as a senior marketing manager, you can say act as a senior marketing manager with 20 years of experience in place branding. That'll just give you a lot more of a refined answer. And then format. Format helps ensure the output is much more in line with the output that you actually need. So if you need a table, ask for it. If you need it to follow a particular report structure, tell it to do so. Tone is where you can shape the tone of voice used, such as being personable or very corporate or avoiding corporate jargon and things like that. You can be specific. And if you aren't sure the right words to use, you can always ask for AI to help you identify keywords based on the feeling you were trying to convey. So for example, you can say something like, I'm writing an email. I don't want to be taken seriously without coming off as too stuck up or cringy. Can you please give me a list of 5 tone keywords I can include in a prompt for ChatGPT? And then from there, you can just select your top keywords to include in your prompt that you're going to be giving it to it later. So for examples of effective prompts, we have Halloween coming up tomorrow. So let's see 2 examples of using AI to create a LinkedIn post. A basic prompt might look something like this. Write a fun LinkedIn social post about Halloween and Eastern Ontario tourism. That will give you a response like this. So it says, Eastern Ontario has all the tricks and treats for an unforgettable Halloween season, from haunted hikes through ghostly forests to candlelit tours in centuries-old forts. There's a thrill for every type of scare seeker. So it goes on more and gives a little bit more detail. And this is a pretty good response. But if we were to follow our formula, or at least most of our formula, we could give it a prompt like this instead. So I said, act as a social media strategist with a focus on community engagement. You are based in Eastern Ontario and need to put together a social post for Halloween and how it relates to tourism in our beautiful region. Create a fun LinkedIn post highlighting the festivities found in the area. Identify real and specific places and activities people can go to/do. Keep it easy to read, family friendly, and use relevant hashtags from Eastern Ontario. Write it in a personable tone that encourages visitors from Ontario and Quebec. So if we break that down, here's what that looks like. You have the persona first for the acting as a social media strategist. You have the context, so the location we're based in and kind of what we're looking for to achieve. And then we have the task or the action verb, which is create. And then we have some format, which is the fun LinkedIn post. And then we have a couple other details, and that all kind of make up the format and the tone that are really shaping this prompt to have better context overall. By doing this a little bit of extra work, we'll get the following response. Looking for a spectacular Halloween in Eastern Ontario, our region is brimming with family-friendly frights, pumpkin-lit paths, and haunted history. Here's your Halloween adventure guide for visitors from Ontario and Quebec. So you'll see that it highlights Pumpkin Inferno, Acres of Terror, Fort Fright, and these are all real and available things that is searched for. And then it ends off with some little things and maybe a little bit of call to action, and then it ends off with the relevant hashtags too. Now, this did a much better job and gets it much closer to a final product. The thing with AI is that it never quite gets us to the final product exactly, but it gets us faster, or gets us there a lot faster. So a few key notes are: one, I asked for real and specific places, so it searched the internet for those items. You'll see in the top left here it says search 6 sites, and it did that. Then it made it actionable and included relevant hashtags. By specifically identifying those places and the locations that they're in, people can read that and then go and search it up and whatever it may be, and then take action on those items. And then it also took note of being family friendly, which is particularly visible in the Acres of Terror line, where it identified the daytime version as well. Like anything though, practice makes perfect. Play with the wording, change up the context, and just ask away. The more you use it, the better you'll be able to prompt it. And before jumping too far into ChatGPT, I want to highlight 3 key settings when using this tool. So first, there's the personalization memory setting. This allows the model to remember certain things about your conversations so that its future responses can become more relevant to you. So you can always choose to clear this or refine that memory over time. But essentially what this is doing is remembering things that you talk about so that whenever you ask it questions in the future, its answers are just much more catered to what it knows about you. And then you have data controls, which leads to improved model for everyone. You can choose whether to allow your conversations to be used as new data to train itself on. So if you want a more private experience, feel free to toggle this off. Sorry, I just wanted to check to make sure there's a question there. Okay, we're good to go. And then another one is customizing ChatGPT. So this is basically like giving it some universal memory and context on who you are and what you need from it. So this also helps guide its responses over time. You can always come back to this, and as you'll see that once you toggle the setting for enable for new chats, then you can add to both of the boxes, and below that there's also some different options for allowing it to browse the internet and stuff like that. But essentially, yeah, you can play with this. You can use ChatGPT to help you come up with the instructions so that it can, better mimic something that you're trying to mimic. But essentially, yes, this gives you some universal context. Now, let's put all of this into practice and run through a real scenario for many organizations and business owners. So for some background, let's just say we are part of a small team running a local tourism operation in Eastern Ontario. After a busy season, we've collected hundreds of customer feedback forms regarding the events we put on during the summer. Manually reading through all of this feedback to identify common themes and actionable insights is time-consuming and overwhelming. You need a way to efficiently process this information to improve your events and address customer concerns promptly. So our challenge. We're overwhelmed by the volume of customer feedback, and we need to extract key insights without spending days sifting through the data. The goal? Use AI to quickly summarize feedback, identify common themes, and prioritize areas for improvement. So our tool of choice. I'll be using ChatGPT in this particular scenario as I believe its well-roundedness will prove helpful for any follow-up questions I want to ask in the future. But before we jump into prompting, we first need to prepare the actual data. So we'll ensure all of our feedback is compiled into one clean Excel spreadsheet. So we'll remove the data that isn't relevant and ensure anonymity by removing any personal information like name and email. So with that, we have our refined list of just the questions that I want ChatGPT to be aware of. Then, with our file ready to go, we'll open up ChatGPT, attach the file, and then craft the prompt. One thing to note is that depending on the amount of data you're working with, you may actually exceed the free plan's threshold, as I've encountered this in the past. But in some cases, you won't, and you should be fine with the free plan. But back into the prompt, let's use our formula and create our prompt. So what I wrote was, act as a tourism operator in Eastern Ontario with an expertise in event planning and management. After a busy summer season, we've collected several customer feedback forms regarding the events we put on during the summer. Our goal is to take the feedback to make next year's summer events even better. Analyze all 53 responses, which I specifically said 53 because I noticed in one of my encounters before, it only took a sample. So just being specific and having it analyze all data is always a good point to make. But then back to that, so analyze all responses in the attached Excel spreadsheet, identify the average rating for overall satisfaction, and provide a summary of the main themes found in the other 3 columns of what did you love about our events, what needs improvement, and any other comments. Here's what that prompt looks like broken down. So you'll see that I first gave it the persona to start, and then I gave it the context of what we have and what we're looking for, and then I gave it the task with some more specifics so that it's more well aware of what I'm looking for. Sorry, and I just see a question from Darren, which is a pretty quick question, so I'll just go ahead and answer that. He said, what are some solutions if you exceed that data threshold? So I think that's where you can experiment with the different tools, so whether that's ChatGPT or Cloud. But in that particular case where I've had that happen, that's where I just jumped to the paid plan, even if it was just for the 1 month. And then you can go ahead and keep going further with it. And I found that the paid plan and the different models you have available actually gives far better responses. But yeah, when you're processing or having it analyze a large amount of data, the paid plan does become more beneficial for that. But if you're just getting it to do things for you, like tasks, then the paid plan or the free plan might be all you need. But if you have any other questions about that, again, we can bring it back to the end. No problem. But yeah, so from our prompt that we gave before, we received this response. So you'll see that it gave the overall satisfaction, which was 7.38. And then it summarized the key themes from the feedback. So for the positives, it highlighted a few things from there. And then the needs improvement, again, also highlighting a few things from there. And then the other comments as well. Again, I asked for summaries, and that's what it gave us. But with that, it became well-versed in the responses, quickly distilled it into bite-sized bits of information, which is exactly what we wanted. And better yet, we can then continue the conversation to better utilize the feedback. So as a follow-up prompt, let's try, based on the areas needing improvement, create a priority list of issues based on frequency and impact, and then suggest potential solutions for each issue that we, as a small tourism team, could implement cost effectively with a high value for attendees. I see someone says that they can't see the image on the slide. Um, Hopefully everyone else can see it. I'm not sure what the issue is there, but again, you'll have access to this presentation afterwards, but I'll try and read any of the images as well. Okay. But yeah, so I'll read about what's there in the images, but I do apologize if you can't see the images being displayed. So for that follow-up response, so again, the prompts, we asked it for to distill that information and prioritize those things. So the response that we got is based on the data, it appears each improvement. So in this case, because I asked it for some sample data, it only generated, kind of one theme or one message for each of those items. But just jumping ahead, so priority lists of improvement areas and suggested solutions. So it's saying that I need more seating areas. Impact is high, increases comfort, and encourages attendees to stay longer, especially for elderly guests. And then the solution for us would be partner with local businesses to sponsor seating or borrow portable seating from community centers, create shaded seating zones to enhance comfort without extensive costs, which is really helpful and really great. And then it also recommended long lines for food, or said that one of the areas for improvement was long lines for food. The impact, again, also high. It says that congestion in food areas can negatively affect attendee experience. But the solution that it gave us was introduce a pre-order or mobile alert system where attendees can receive a notification when their food is ready. Alternatively, add express lanes for simpler items or stagger popular food vendor times to reduce peak times. So it goes on to talk about a few other things that were mentioned in the spreadsheet, but pretty much what you see there is that it's, again, prioritizing those items and then distilling it into actionable insights for us to take away, which is exactly what we wanted. So if this is your first go or two, I would strongly recommend you still review the customer feedback yourself, like how you would before the use of AI in general. And then you want to compare the findings. So this will help you either, one, ensure the responses are actually accurate, or two, refine their prompt to ensure that it is more accurate for the next time that you ask it. So for you, the next steps are really to try it out. Again, you want to start small and work your way up as you get more comfortable. Then you want to document that process so you can identify your own set of tips and points of what works for your needs. And if you have a team, then you can start sharing this with them to get everyone working more efficiently. Again, just imagine the time that you'll save overall with everyone involved. Then we can circle back to evaluating the impact. How much time was saved, or maybe even not saved? How much, has customer satisfaction improved? You want to capture your findings and see the impact you've had. This will be especially helpful if any of you need to provide reasoning to something like a board of directors for why you need to add this expense to your budget. And then finally, you can expand out to try more and more tasks. Now, if you want to run through an example like this on your own without having the actual data, simply ask ChatGPT to generate some sample data for you. Identify some requirements like table headers, or basically the questions, and soon you have a bunch of data to actually experiment with. But I also know there's kind of an elephant in the room whenever AI comes up, and that is adoption barriers. So, all sounds great, all sounds beneficial, but it's also still so new and it's growing very fast. I know for many people I talk to, there are some adoption barriers, whether that's their own, with different things, or from higher ups, or, perhaps your boss or your managers aren't just allowing the use of AI quite yet. For some, I see that there's one image missing here. for some reason, but for some, there is a fear of the unknown, which is completely understandable. It's only recently become accessible to the everyday person, making it this whole new thing to get used to. What's the learning curve? How do I know whether it's working for me or against me? It's kind of like when the internet came out, where it took a whole lot of steps to get used to it, but now it's very, very commonly used. To this, I'd say that adoption of AI has already grown tremendously and for good reason. According to Grammarly's 2024 State of Business Communication, which I touched on at the Tourism Summit, their poll of companies that have adopted it are reporting figures like 44% increased productivity and 46% reduced stress in the workplace. Well, yes, it will take getting used to. The benefits may potentially greatly outweigh the energy required to learn how to use it. And then documenting those results will be critical. Or, sorry for the image missing again, or maybe you just have you don't have time to work on it. Again, also valid argument. I know everyone is very busy. We have our own things going on. But then my question to you would be, how much time are you potentially losing by not using it? Because if it does have the potential capacity to alleviate hours off of your workload, then you're potentially losing out on those hours as well. I strongly believe that the adoption of AI can have a strong impact, but that really starts with three things. First, I guess all these images are missing. I see them on my end, but they're missing on this presentation here. But first, you have education and training, much like what you're doing right now. You want to be sure to leverage this time, the time that you take outside, and then the resources that are out there as well, which we'll go over in a minute. And then you have incremental implementation. Well, jumping in the deep end could work for some, like swimming. Just start small with this tool and work your way up. And finally, demonstrate the value. Highlight the measurable stats observed in the pilot projects, whether good or bad. So again, noting that it's important to take note of where you are right now. What are your current stats like? How long do things take? What is employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction? Taking note of all of that now makes anything that you do in the future measurable. So again, if you have to report it to a board of directors, if you're just becoming more efficient for yourself as an individual, seeing that progress really helps you, keep going in a stronger fashion. And now, if you start seeing that success, that's when you'll want to foster a supportive environment. So you have things like team involvement. You want to get your team involved, encourage them to contribute ideas, and create an open loop for feedback and questions. Because if you have an idea about something, well, perhaps other people on your team do too. And they could, come across something that's really, really helpful or delivers a much better result. And then next to that, we have celebrating small wins. Like with anything, you want to acknowledge the improvements you see, or cut off the disadvantages that you come across as well, no matter how small or big. You just want to make sure you celebrate your small wins and know that it's a growing journey. It's going to have growing pains, but it will hopefully work out for the best. So how should we use AI responsibly? The ethics and best practices becomes pretty popular whenever AI comes up in conversation. So first, I want to cover data privacy. So many of these big AI companies are becoming more transparent and putting a higher priority on security, thankfully, which is great for all of us. But like any platform, I would always refrain from sharing confidential information and removing any unnecessary details, much like what we did in the Excel file earlier. And then we have accuracy and trust. As I mentioned, AI is best as an assistant, but it would be missing a lot of context for key decisions. Additional to that, there are times where it could do something called a hallucination. In other words, that's where it makes up an answer that it isn't necessarily true. And that's just because it's still learning. It's trying to pull resources, but maybe if something doesn't exist, but it just generates something and it could mix things here and there. So I always encourage you to fact check details that could be a bit more important. And in the event you use AI for any customer related items, it's always good to identify those in your policies to keep things transparent. So whether you have a privacy policy or terms of use policy, just having a little blurb there about AI and how you might be using their information could be really helpful to stay transparent with your audience. And then bias. So just like news outlets or different forms of media, each model is based or is trained on their own set of data and ongoing responses, which helps it to be so good at what it does. But in some cases, it may have certain biases depending on the info it was trained on, how recent the data is, and then of course, who created it as well. So this could be, more of like a company level, like who they are morally, but also more so, if that AI was crafted to help a particular industry, then perhaps it'll lack knowledge in other areas and it won't be as broad, but it'd be very specific in one particular subject. So that could be a bias as well. So again, like any other news outlets, be sure to get all sides of the story and double check things. And then very important is maintaining the human touch. While AI can assist, it's frankly just not you. It's not human. It doesn't carry the same experiences you may have or have the same deep-rooted knowledge in the things that you know. It may not, it might may not know Bill down from the road or that there was a big announcement for your community. My point is that you want to make sure you're always injecting your own human attributes after, whether that's through personalization, like anecdotes or insider tips, or general quality assurance, or even just aligning it to your brand voice. You want to find a way to make it your own. AI is just a stepping stone, and it's kind of the getting ahead of the game faster, but it's not the final product. You want to avoid the AI tone of voice that I've started to notice more in blogs and some social posts. And if I'm noticing it, then I'm sure people will start to pick up on it. And the last thing you want to do is become inauthentic and be easily identified as using AI for everything that you're doing. So besides your own experimentation and what time you're directly using the tool, what else could you do to get better at using AI? But thankfully, since its rapid development, there's been quite a few resources out there that can really help accelerate your process. First, I want to give a really big shout out to Jeff Su. He is a YouTuber that I highly, highly recommend. He's great at providing very actionable tips and tricks for using AI tools among many other things like project management. And then you have online courses. So Coursera and Google, they both offer courses around AI to expand your knowledge. Well, I've never personally taken these. I know that their options are out there and that I've heard good things about them. And then probably one of the biggest ones is community. While you're all on your own journey with AI, you're all here to learn and advance further. I'd encourage you all to stay connected with each other or even just myself. This tech is still so new for everyone and it's growing very, very fast. So why not work together and collaborate to all be better at what we do, especially if we're all part of, the Southern or Eastern Ontario community. The better we all do, the better hopefully our communities do as well. So over this session, I hope you've been able to pull some really actionable takeaways, develop a greater knowledge, and get a bit ambitious with what you envision. This tool is literally available for all of us to pick up and use right now. You want to focus on assessing your needs, starting small with room for experimentation, exploring the different tools, and then scaling gradually. Whether you're already acquainted with AI tools or this webinar is really just your first step towards it, again, I encourage you to take the steps in trying this tech. It's growing incredibly fast already, and we know it will just continue to grow more. So make the most of it and see where it can take you now. Well, of course, you'll get access to this presentation. I would love for you to keep me in the loop on your journey as well. And reach out if you want to chat more, discuss ideas, think about questions, and just overall keep me in the loop on your journey. So then just finally, as a quick recap, here's an overview of the roadmap that I'm recommending that we discussed today. So we had, first is assessing your business needs, which was identifying your pain points, prioritizing opportunities, and setting clear goals. And then you have crafting your plan, which was starting small and simple, selecting your AI tools, and then planning your implementation. And then after that, you have refining, documenting, and sharing that process if you have a team. So with that said, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And now I want to pass it over to anyone that may have a question.
I was going to say, Chris, I see one in the chat already from Robert, who
Yes.
says he has Gmail that gets flooded with spam.
Hmm.
Most of it goes to the spam folder, but then it means that he has to spend time sifting through looking for legit emails.
Hmm.
Can he use AI to block spam emails from even making it to the spam folder?
Hmm. I believe so. I guess even before AI, if you're using Gmail, I believe that there's ways to even predefine what things get marked as spam or what things get blocked. Um, but for that in particular, I don't think I know, I guess, an AI tool that will necessarily block it before it reaches your inbox. But you can, say if you're using Gmail, you can work with Google Gemini to see if they can come up with a solution for you. So one thing with Gemini is that since it integrates with the Google Suite or the Google Workspace, so that's Gmail, Google Sheets, Google Docs, etc., um, you can have it summarize the emails that come through so that you can maybe just prioritize the ones that you should look at first without having to actually go into your inbox. But again, that'll kind of take some experimentation. But I do know that Gmail has some specific spam filters that you can set yourself. But I know that does become tricky because unfortunately, with spam and bots, they change your emails all the time. It's never the same email, and they're always growing, which is always an issue. But yeah, you can always try just working with Gemini and see if there's some sort of solution, and just ask it to say, bring that question to it, and say, "Hey, this is an issue I'm dealing with. Is there any way that you can help?" And then just see what answer it provides you.
Perfect. And then I see another one here from Cindy. She's asking if you would use the same task context example approach to using AI to
Mhm.
generate images as opposed to a text response.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you can use definitely variables of that. I don't think you necessarily need all the elements. For example, like um, you know, format and tone might look different when you're generating an image. But I think using variables could help you get a more refined image. So, certainly the context, if you have any examples, you can attach as images. Say if you're working on your own concepts or there's some, really great things out there that you really enjoy, then you can provide that as well. So I think you can definitely use elements. I don't think you necessarily need to use all of them. And just like with text prompts as well, you don't have to use all pieces of that formula, but the more information you give it, the better it'll be. And I think even yesterday, I was learning more and more about some other things, and they, I think context is king or something like that, where, the more context, more specific you can get, just the better output you'll receive. And there's also one thing you can do where there's different levels. So say if you identify whether this is a text prompt or an image prompt, if you identify that the response it gave you was maybe a level one, so super basic, then you can ask for higher levels, like a level two or level three, to try and get it to just push its boundaries a little bit.
Excellent. We have another question from Robert asking if there's an AI tool that can take out key info out of an Outlook email and put it into specific cells in Excel. And then added to that, just wondering what extent AI can do admin support tasks.
Yeah, so AI tool they can take key info out of Outlook email and put it into specific cells. So when working with Outlook, I know that Microsoft also has their own version. I think it's technically based on ChatGPT, so it's the same nature, but Microsoft also has their own version. I don't personally use a lot of the Microsoft tools, so I don't know the depth of integration it can directly have with that AI tool. So I'm not sure if it's like Gemini where it can, analyze your data and things like that. But in terms of something like that, you can also look at just automation. So when I talked about automation before, one of the tools that I use pretty often is make.com. And basically with that, that's where you, again, give that predefined set of steps. So you can identify, say, for example, if it's Outlook and you're looking for a particular email to come your way. Okay, well, you can define, when an email with this subject line comes your way, extract that data, and then put that into a Google Sheet. Again, that's automation is kind of its own separate thing, and it's very, very exciting for me as well. But you can look at those two different tools and see what work with you. I do apologize that I'm not too familiar with Outlook as they don't use it, but I hope that maybe one of those Microsoft tools could help.
Awesome. And we have another question here from Shaunis, who's looking for any comments you might have on perplexity.ai. They said that they like how it cites its sources and provides links so you can fact check what it's saying. And then they're asking if ChatGPT or Gemini can do that. It does say that it said it searched 6 sites, but does it
Mhm.
show you what sites it searched?
Yeah, so I know Perplexity has been a new one that's coming up and kind of making its foundation known. I personally don't have any experience with it yet, but I'm going to soon. But yeah, I have heard good things about, citing sources and things like that. So if that's something that's working for you, then great. But as far as ChatGPT and Gemini, uh, yes. So it does say that, search 6 sites, but you can also ask it to just provide those sources for you. So if there's, something that you're really looking for, or say if you get a response and then you want to fact check it, then you can just ask it to provide those responses for you. Or in your initial prompt in general, again, just asking it to provide those sources, and then it'll either provide a direct link or just say, for example, something like Washington Post and it's hyperlinked. So you can go and fact check that. I do recommend even fact checking those sources because I've had it before too, where it hyperlinks something and maybe it existed at some point when the data was trained, but it no longer exists, or it brought me to a 404 page. So even if it gives you a source, just make sure to check it, or just do some additional Googling after. But if Perplexity is doing really good at that, then that's great to hear, and maybe I'll try that out myself.
There always seems to be new ones popping up.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think you'll kind of have like much like Bell and Rogers, you'll kind of have the big guys at the top, but then more and more will come out to compete.
Perfect. And I was going to say it's one of those things too that you're seeing. I know that you made the distinction between, AI and automation. And I know that a lot of the big like social media platforms tend to have some automation features
Mhm.
built in. Like Meta has their own AI platform that they have for the search software and
Mhm.
answering messages. Do you have any comments on the Meta AI? Or do you use it yourself? Do you find it useful? Is it something that people should be utilizing in their own business?
Yeah, I don't personally have too much experience with Meta AI. Again, like you said, because there's so many popping up all the time. I think I've just become very familiar with ChatGPT, so it's just become my primary source. So unfortunately, I don't have too much experience with that to shed light on. But again, it's one of those things like with any of the other ones that I suggested, you just gonna have to try it out, test it, see how it goes. I think for everyone, even myself, it's very much so an experimentation phase where everyone's growing and just learning from it. So it just takes a lot of trying it out and seeing what it does. And if it doesn't work out, then you just don't use it anymore. But if it does, then hopefully it saves you a lot of time.
So the key takeaway today for everybody watching is practice. Don't be afraid to put some text into boxes and see what happens. I see Kathleen said that it was an interesting topic. She's new to it, but she's going to work on it. I'm happy to be learning more on it. So thank you for joining, Kathleen. I also see a comment from Robert, who's asking which AIs can create graphics and images, or if you have some suggestions on AI platforms that do create graphics.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, directly even in ChatGPT, it has so they have like their text-based model, but then they also have DALL-E, which is their image generation model. So the beauty of how it all works now is that everything is integrated together. So you can just again talk to ChatGPT, and then ask it to generate some sort of image, and then it'll go ahead and do so. Additional to that, you have platforms like Midjourney, which is another big one. You have Adobe Firefly if you have access to the Adobe suite. And then there's also bing.com/image create, but I think that's also just based on DALL-E. So you can always just experiment with the different ones there too. Kathy, great session. Thank you. Perfect.
And
Appreciate
I was
that.
going to say, Brenda's curious about privacy when
Mhm.
using these systems and platforms.
Yeah, I think I mean, as far as our own precautionary measures that we can take, not sharing confidential information and things like that, that's one side of it. And then as far as our own privacy as users, um, I think it's one of those things that when it first was became very, very popular and essentially got viral with, ChatGPT, I think that was a pretty big concern and there wasn't much documentation around it. Thankfully, a lot of companies now are becoming much more aware of that, and putting better things in practice. I know that's so, for example, Cloud dot by Anthropic is one of those companies that saw that gap in security and privacy and tried to fill it. So they have a security first approach. And I would hope that means that, everything that they do is regarding the person's security and how they're using it. Um, but I think with any platform, even with like Meta, Facebook, or even just on Google Chrome or just browsing the internet, we know that our data is to some degree being tracked virtually all the time. So I wouldn't be, shocked if that was the case with AI tools as well. So just be mindful of what you're inputting into it as well. Um, but it's one of those things that we're just kind of growing with it as that stuff gets developed on the company side as well.
So don't be sharing any personal information that would be used for, don't put your credit card information in there. Don't
No,
put anything
definitely
that
don't do
might
that.
be, sensitive to your accounts or, anything, your identity. Don't give it your personal information. I don't see any more questions popping up. I encourage you all to write down Chris's contact information here that's up on the screen so that if you do have questions or you're looking to pursue something further, definitely reach out to him. He is definitely an expert in this. I'm also just learning, so I'm not in any position to answer anything too in depth. So make sure you're writing down Chris's information because he is the person you want to be reaching out to get further information and get help on things like this. But if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to wrap it up for today. Thank you, Chris, so much for this presentation. It was clearly a very popular one. It was something that a lot of people are curious about. And a reminder to everyone when you get the follow-up email to answer the survey, provide some feedback about the session. And just a huge thank you to everyone for attending. And again, a huge thank you to Chris for putting this together for us because it's a hot topic.
Yeah, perfect. It was my pleasure. I'm glad to be sharing this information, and then I hope that people can really take some actionable insights and start going at it.
Perfect. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you again, Chris. And we'll see you in our next session, which is going to be in a couple of weeks for social media. But any questions on AI, direct them to Chris. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you for joining.
All right,
Bye,
bye. Take
Chris. Thank
care.
you.